Hello and welcome to my Wingspan bonus card tier list. I'll be ranking each bonus card from the base game and both expansions into one of 5 tiers. These sorts of things are of course based on opinion, but I'll do my best to make sure things stay objective. I'll mostly be looking at average point gain, both for if you ignore a card and play around it. With that said, let's get into it. So first bonus card we have to talk about is Behaviorist. Frankly, I think this one's okay. It's not amazing. I really wish that it gave you like 1 point per column if you had like 2 different powers, like how a site selection expert works. If you go for Behaviorist really hard and you get maybe 3 columns with different powers, then you know it can be 9 points and that's a lot. But doing that is a lot more restrictive than a lot of other bonus cards. I don't think it's very good overall. Bird Bander entirely depends on what you have going. In my opinion, a lot of really good birds live in multiple habitats. But also sometimes you just don't draw those and you have a decent build with birds that are just in their one habitat. So, I mean, this, like most bonus cards, depends on what your board looks like. But overall, I would say it's pretty easy to get like 4 to 5, but getting 6 or more is going to be pretty difficult. I'm going to say C should be like average. D is like notably bad. B is like a little good. A is pretty good. S is amazing. So this will go here. Citizen Scientist, birds with tucked cards. There are a few things in the game that will allow you to tuck multiple cards, something like Welcome Swallow or the Chiff Chaff or Chaffinch. But I would say just because those birds exist, if you like had any of those, this one is so good. Like it's just free 6 points. But by and large, it's not that good. Diet Specialist is really good. It's an incredibly consistent 6 points. Pretty much every game I play, by the end of it, I would meet the 6 point threshold for this card. I think it's incredibly good. Definitely an A tier. Not quite S because it is only 6 points, but still very strong. Ethologist is honestly really good. I would say that in an average game, if you don't focus on it, it's still pretty common to get 6 points from this. And if you put in a little bit of effort, you can probably get 8. That, in my opinion, is really good. I'm gonna say it's A. So the forest, grasslands, and wetland data analyst cards are all pretty much the same. And in my opinion, so okay, they're kind of interesting because they are very versatile because you can do ascending or descending and you can skip birds. So you can almost always get 3 and often even 4, depends, but getting the 5 for the full 8 points is nearly impossible if you are not just building around it from the start. So in my opinion, this is a very flexible, like you'll pretty much always get points, but it's nothing crazy. These are all B tier bonus cards in my opinion. I would, like late game, if I'm drawing bonus cards, I would often prefer to see these than these, unless something specific I've done really works well for these, which, you know, is how bonus cards work. But of course, now we have Mechanical Engineer, which in my opinion is a very easy S tier bonus card. 95% of my games, by the end, I always meet the 8 point threshold. This bonus card is literally just a free 8 points at the end of the game. It's so good. Site Selection Expert is pretty flexible. It's common, in my opinion, to get like 4 or 5 points from this guy, depending on how you've built your bird preserve. And in my opinion, that makes it a B tier. Anatomist is interesting. If you get it early enough to play around it, it's very common that you'll reach the 7 point threshold, but it is something you still need to play around. Late game, it's entirely possible that you won't have any, so if you draw it, you're just kind of sad. In my mind, that puts it in C tier. Backyard Birder, I feel like the threshold is just a little bit high. I would like to see, personally, I think this bonus card would be more usable if it was 4 to 5 birds. Even just reaching 5 is honestly pretty difficult. Do I really put it in D? I think I do. Generally, you don't want too many cheap birds and you just play those in the beginning, and it's very rare that you even would play like 5 of those birds, let alone playing 7. I just think it's a lot of work for not very much gain. And even if you do go all out in it, you're still only getting 6 points. I'm gonna say it's D tier. It's not good. Bird Counter. Tucking powers are some of the best powers in the game. So just getting an extra 2 victory points per each tucking bird is quite good, honestly. I mean, this is just another sort of thing that totally depends on what you're doing. In a normal game, you're maybe getting 4 to 6. I think it's still, it's quite good. I'm gonna say A tier. Bird feeder wants you to get so many birds that eat wheat. 8 or more is so much. It can be pretty tough to even get 5. It's so much for so little gain, in my opinion. I'm gonna say it's D tier. It's time for Breeding Manager, which in my opinion is the easiest D tier bonus card. This one is so weak. In my game, we have house ruled this one to be 2 points per bird, and it's still probably the weakest bonus card of the game. Getting 1 point for like, if you plan around it at the end of the game, maybe the 2 or maybe 3 birds that have at least 4 eggs, so weak for what you have to do to get it to work. It's like, you could probably even make it like 3 points per bird and it would still not break the game. But at 1 point per bird, it is so underwhelming. Cartographer is basically exactly like Analyst. Their percentages are pretty much the same, and their thresholds and requirements are pretty much exactly the same. And these are just 2 different flavors of the same idea. Ecologist is a very nice bonus card. This is, you get 6 points for doing nothing, and you can also possibly get more. In my most recent game, I had Ecologist, and I completely filled my board and got 10 points from it. Very good bonus card. Okay, now we've reached all the builder bonus cards. This is Enclosure Builder for ground nests, Nest Box Builder for tree nests, Platform Builder for stick nests, and Wildlife Gardener for cup nests. All of these have the same threshold and point values, and in my opinion, they go in C tier. If you get them early and can play around them, sure, you can reach the 7-point threshold, but otherwise, on these ones, reaching the 4-point threshold is honestly pretty difficult. 4 birds with a nest type is pretty tough to get, but if you do have star nests, these get quite a bit better. I don't think these are too good. Maybe if you play around nest types more, then you think these are better. Definitely up to personal interpretation. So Falconer, it is unfortunate that most of the school power birds in Wingspan are a little underwhelming, and as a result, I rarely take school powers. There are some notable exceptions, like Sacred Kingfisher is for some reason a school power bird. By and large, I don't really want school power birds unless it's just a big bird. You'd have to build around him for it to be good, and then you are taking subpar birds to make this better. And I don't think it's very good. I think 9 times out of 10, I would prefer to see another bonus card. So Fishery Manager, we've already seen Bird Feeder with wheat, but this one is much easier to obtain because there are so many water birds that want fish that you can quite easily reach the bottom threshold, which when compared to the bird feeder, it's quite difficult to reach the first threshold. And for this Fishery Manager, you can also reach the 8-point threshold pretty easily. And I don't know. I think this is quite a bit better. I'm gonna put it in low B. I think it's honestly pretty good. Birds that eat only grubs though is not very good. There are so few cards that satisfy this. It's just so rough. And sure, most of the cards that only eat grubs are generally like all right, they're playable. But this is just such a tight restriction that getting points out of it is pretty tough. Okay, now let's talk about Forester, Prairie Manager, and Wetland Scientist. They do all have different thresholds, and this is interesting because notably the Grassland variant, Prairie Manager, you don't have to get all 5 birds to only live in the grasslands for it to reach the highest threshold. And in my opinion, that places it in B tier. Okay, honestly, this tree one, if you get all 5 birds as only tree birds, you only get 5 points. That is so low. And the water one is more fair. Wetland Scientist, you at least get 7 points if you manage that. By and large, I usually go for these end up going for these bottom thresholds, and then you have to build around something that gets you very few victory points, and that's just kind of sad. But the nice thing is, this Prairie Manager, you do get 8 points for only 4, so you can still maybe put like a Franklin's Goal or that sort of thing in the grasslands and still be fine. Historian is interesting. I don't remember who it was, but someone got a ton of points from Historian. It was like 10, maybe 12, and just because they had kept picking up those birds, and that can happen. But you can also have games where you get this late and then you have like 1 bird that satisfies it, and then you're just kind of sad. I think overall, it's a pretty average bonus card. Okay, Large Bird Specialist. In Wingspan, a lot of the birds that are high bird points also have large wingspans. This isn't, of course, true of all of them, but it is a general tendency. And so by the end of the game, it is quite common for me to have at least 4 birds that satisfy this, but getting 6 can sometimes be difficult. but I do think that it is easier to satisfy than most of these cards in C, and I'm gonna go ahead and put it in B, but you could make an argument for being in C. Omnivore Specialist is the second S tier bonus card in my opinion. Omnivore birds are by and large pretty good, and you can also use them to put nectar in your spent nectar spot in your habitat, which is amazing. This bonus card just complements that so well because you want to be getting omnivore birds, and so this by the end of the game will often be like 6 to 8 points, and sometimes if you're even lucky you can get like 10 or more. I think it's really good. If you compare it to bird counter, it's just more universally applicable because no matter what kind of build you're going for, it's very possible that you have omnivore birds, and this Omnivore Specialist is just amazing. Oologist, if you have an egg engine, you can consistently get 6 points from this guy, but if you don't, ending the game with eggs on 7 different birds to get any points is a pretty tall order, especially because when I'm laying eggs, I'm often not doing it with the egg row. I'm doing it with stuff like mourning dove or bush tit or pink powers that lay eggs, and so those will go on specific birds, and I just spend my eggs from there rather than spreading them all out like what Oologist wants. So I just think getting even 3 points from this for the average game is really tough. It's gotta be D tier. Passerine Specialist, you want small birds. This is not horrible. It's not very good though. Reaching the first threshold is a little bit tough. You need 4 small birds. I think it's a little underwhelming, a little average. I don't know, C tier. Cartographer, I'm going to put in B tier. I think that colors are very common and it's quite easy to, when you draw it, have reached the first threshold. With a little bit of work, reaching the second isn't too hard either. I'm gonna say it's B tier, though it's pretty low B tier. Rodentologist, this one really depends because there are a lot of birds that you'd be happy to get that also cost rats, stuff like great horned owl or like white-bellied sea eagle. A lot of them are stuff that you want late game because they're just big points. But the problem is most of the birds that cost rats in the early game are all like kind of crappy skull power birds. For an average game, this would get me maybe 4 points. If you get lucky, it can get you like 8 or 10, but I think by and large, this one is pretty average. It's probably about here. Bird cards in hand at the end of the game. I really want this card to be good. Because I like the water row a lot. It's just so difficult. Getting 5 cards at the end of your hand, like that's really inefficient to have that many. And sure, sometimes like activating the water row is your best thing to do, but I've had more games where I have a heavy emphasis on my water row and I wouldn't even reach the first threshold than games where I have a higher emphasis on my water row and I would reach it. Even in the circumstance where this card is good, it's still not that good because it's so inefficient to actually get it. So I think it has to go in D tier. And we are rounding things out with Viticulturalist. In my opinion, this is really, really quite good. The reason that I think Viticulturalist tends to be better, even though it's less likely to get now with Oceania and it's technically worth less, is cherry birds can go anywhere and they're a lot easier to slot in, whereas fish birds, by and large, mostly go only in the water. So if you have maybe like a tucking engine in the water, then you don't have the room to get enough birds that eat fish to reach the second threshold. Whereas with cherries, with Viticulturalist, that isn't really a problem. So that's why I think it's better, even though they are such similar cards. Well, this is the completed bonus card tier list. Please note, I didn't put much thought into the ordering. Timestamps for each individual card are in the description below, as is the link to this tier list. Thank you all for watching, and have a fantastic day.